Hello, I just found my notes on Troy Singleton's chum Q form, and I'll see if I can read my handwriting. Alright, starts off. If you use a steel pole and you hammer at one side and the pole is not strong enough, it may break. With a punch, it may not break, but the structure may collapse. So if you have not trained your joints correctly from the limeted, you may hurt your joints. If you're using chum Q, that means you're using the body mass to punch. The most important part of chum Q is the rotation movement. The first thing you must do is, when using the rotation, is you must make sure that you have the balance. Then you can start to coordinate the movement you have learnt from limeted with the chum Q rotation. So the movements from limeted is one type of force, combined with chum Q rotation creates two types of force. So when you attack with two types of force, it makes it more difficult for the other person to defend themselves. If you hold 100 pounds of pressure on your arms and someone moves it from the side, it can upset your balance. Chum Q is a good method to make contact with the other person's hands, and you can use your body mass to attack the other person. That's why when you use a chum Q, you can generate a lot of power. Pivoting is very important. If you do it properly, the rotation power is very great. Don't use muscle, just think of the centre turning. That's why the first part of chum Q is pivoting. When Sifu Troy Singleton learnt the chum Q, he just did pivoting for several months, for several hours. You need to get every movement into a habit. So when you think of turning, you do it naturally, do the movement. Don't try to copy the movement. Try to use your mind to direct the movement. So when you make contact with the other person, you will naturally do the movement together through your mind's control. So if you have not made it a habit, you have to think of doing the bongsa, think of doing the pivoting. You have lost all concentration and it will not work properly. Everything's a habit. In the form by yourself, focus on your centre, but when using it in combat, focus your centre on the enemy. If you're side on to the attacker, your centre line is still a straight line to the attacker. Moving sideways with bongsa is creating another way of two-way force, another type of two-way force. Moving forward into bongsa is another way of creating two-way force. Two-way force is just a name. You may be creating 3 or 4 types of force. Example, bongsa pivot with the stepping sideways. It's more than 2 ways of force. It's usually used in fighting. The punch can be used to hit the other person, but when you practice the movement, just think of how to generate force into the movement, not anger. Think of how to generate your body mass to the point where you want to make contact with the other person. The elbow slaps is using more than one way of force. The elbow is sinking, the forearm is going downward. He does a demo. If you use 2 arms to try to stop the strike, it becomes just a defensive movement. But if you sink the elbow, you can control 2 hands with 1, leaving the whole upper body open for an attack. That's why the first bit of chum Q is very powerful already, if done properly. So you sink with the elbow, coordinate the forearm, but it's very hard to sink with the forearm. You may lift your body up. Even though the forearm is going across, the elbow is going back, just like the praying 3 times to Buddha part from limeted. Don't lose your balance and try to pull the other person in with your forearm. Use your stance from the limeted and sink the elbow. In limeted, you're using your mind to direct all your movements in one direction, but in chum Q you're directing several limeted movements in different directions. That's why it's harder to manage. The turning movement is how to bring your body mass to the elbow. but you must do the pivoting properly, otherwise you can't bring the body mass to the elbow. If someone has grabbed my wrist and elbow, by turning it throws the other person to the side. But if you do not make your jump cue a habit, you may have to think about your forearm and where you're focusing. Your structure will not be perfect. So in actual fighting, if you have to think about, have I got my back straight, am I pivoting, is my elbow sinking, by the time you've done all that thinking, you've been hit by the other person already. That's why you need to practice and practice, so when you use any movement it comes virtually directly. Sifu Troy talks about the choppy bit, how the elbow just moves slightly and the forearm moves a long way. Then uses clay in a demo. Clay shapes up and Troy puts his square on to both of Troy's arms and jolts his elbow and upsets Clay's balance. Troy's hands end up near Clay's face from the same movement. In the pivoting part, one arm is rotating into bong sao, the other into wu sao, and you're pivoting, so that creates three circles together as one movement. When you concentrate on three things at once, it's very difficult to manage. That's why you need to know what you're doing from the sulam tau. You can use the bong sao plus pivot in conjunction with lap sao. The same movement can be used in different ways of defense and attack, moving them away or pulling them in. As Troy demonstrates, any movement can change to a different purpose. Depends on the way the other person's force is coming to the way that you want to use it. When you're good, you use minimum effort to get maximum results. When you use chum cue, you're also using sulam tau. Well, I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, thanks.